Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by TechTables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves. Today I am so excited. We have Cory Wilburn, CIO at the University of Texas McCombs School of Business, and Doug Thompson, Chief Education Architect at Tanium. Welcome to the Public Sector Show by TechTables.
Thank you, Joe.
I am really pumped because we are inside the Carasoft booth, and the camera most likely won't pick this up. It is actually somewhat very loud right now, recording the podcast, when I'm used to a quiet room. So this is pretty awesome right now. So Cory, for those who don't know you, quick intro.
So my name's Cory Wilburn, Chief Information Officer at the University of Texas McCombs School of Business. I've been here for a couple of years now, working in higher ed. Prior to that, I was with Texas State Government with the Texas General Land Office. I've got a 27-year career in IT and proud to say all of it in the public sector. So really excited about doing work that I believe is meaningful and makes a difference.
And you forgot something. You were task president up until most recently.
That's exactly right. President of TASK. It's a great state organization for state higher education and state agency leaders.
Love that. Doug?
Thanks a lot, Doug Thompson. I've been at Tanium for about 4 years now. I spent 20 years at Microsoft before that, where I actually worked back in my previous role and was part of the account team to do that. So I'm just basically a sales nerd. Chief Education Architect is the official name, but sales nerd is what I do as a passion. I'm just curious about technology and how it can help business and schools and stuff be safer and do things better.
And you also have a podcast, is that right?
I also have a podcast. I host the Tanium podcast. I like to talk, and I've done a TED Talk, so I like to do all that stuff, so yeah.
Okay, awesome, I love that. Maybe we'll cross-post this episode to the Tanium podcast, and it'll be a fun time. Cory, you spent almost just exactly, you said 2 decades at GLO, and we had 2 great interviews. One of my favorites, I think it's because it was at the Commodore, was episode 107, How to Develop and Multiply Leaders. That was with Retta Mosley also, who I thought she just went off into the sunset, and now she's at DIR.
That's right.
And she came back. I thought she was like gone, but she's back. Love Retta, she's fantastic. So from there to you've been at McCombs for 2 years, give us the lay of the land at McCombs right now.
A first shout out to Retta. She and I had a glass of wine about 4 or 5 days ago, so I'm glad you brought her up. Great friend of mine. At UT-McCombs, we are super busy with a number of projects out there. I think probably the one that's getting the most headlines right now is the new building that we're building. It's called Mulva Hall. It will be a new undergraduate school of business that we're just now breaking ground on. We've torn down a parking garage. We'll begin that construction, and we should be ready to have classes in there by 2028 if construction schedule holds.
I love that, that's fantastic. Doug, on our podcast intro call, you mentioned whole of education, which I really loved. But before we jump into that, you mentioned the last 3 years at Tanium. Don't mention Microsoft, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, sorry, another tech company.
Another tech company, where you've developed comprehensive education strategies aimed at safeguarding the sensitive data. And I did glean this from your LinkedIn profile, 50 million students, I like that number. So I was first curious, how did you get to become a Chief Education Architect? And tell us more about that role and then jump into the whole of education.
Sure, when I came into Tanium, it was a sales nerd role that came in, and they didn't have a lot of big focus on how do we do things in education. Because even though if you're state and local government, it's still different than what education is. And in my previous role, I spent 10 years in the education team, so I understood the environment and all, so I came up, here's a strategy of how we can really help go do things. And with the Tanium platform, there's some things that we could do that I wasn't able to do in my previous company because of the way the architecture and stuff comes up. So I'm really excited about that. I wish we had 50 million customers, but that's a lofty goal. That's the addressable market, let's just say, that we could go out and protect.
Got it. Okay, so now tell me a little bit more about this. We were talking about the whole of education.
Yeah. So it's an offshoot of what we call our whole of government approach, where we're finding in a lot of institutions that it's hard to get all these disparate players to play nicely together. How do you have one place where you can do like an AWACS plane where I can see the entire playing field of what's going around? Due to point solutions and security boundaries of different either cloud or on-premise, that makes it darn near impossible to get that overall view of things that's going on. And at a high level, if somebody at the University of Texas gets breached or something like that, It doesn't matter that it was maybe in Cory's department or another one, it's got that brand name on it. And how do you get visibility into what all that is? And that's really what we can help provide. And getting that visibility, then you can also then delegate control. So it's about how do we mature the educational market to go ahead and manage more like you would in an enterprise. That was one of the interesting things when I started my previous role. I thought UT system, I thought, okay, this is like an enterprise. Everything goes up there. Oh no, it's probably best described as a coalition of the unwilling at a lot of times.
Okay, coalition of the unwilling. So let's dive in, before we jump back to Cory, real quick, 1 to 2 of your favorite higher ed customer examples.
There's one, it's Winston Salem State University, and actually I did a podcast with her. They came to us, looked at Tanium, I did the original demo to them about what went on. I visited her a year later. They came in and she said, look, this just totally transformed what we did. Before they were stuck in where we're patching. I'm still waiting. Anybody here get this for patching? I keep waiting for somebody to get an IT for patching. Nobody ever answers that. But their total attitude changed because with Tanium, they got that visibility across things. They were able to automate things that they hadn't been able to do before. And now they're coming to her as opposed to simply going in, okay, I got to go work today. They're coming here with ideas and she's got to hold them back. And this is one of those things that you don't think about how a technology can impact the people, the environment around it. And I watched your episode with the leadership type thing. I thought it was great, your approach to have that. It's a lot like it. How do you help people reach their potential? And this was a great way to do that.
Love that. So Cory, in our previous podcast, you talked about empowering IT teams to drive innovation. How has this evolved since our last convo from GLL to McCombs, state agency to higher ed?
That's a great question. I still have that belief that the best way to empower people is to get them in the door and explain the assignment, get on the same page, make sure that they understand the requirements and the constraints, and then give them the opportunity to make choices. I think when they feel empowered to make their own choices, people really get skin in the game and they take ownership and that makes them more dedicated. From my perspective, I don't think that's changed. I think that's a great way to approach public service. What really has changed, and it's not just necessarily tied to higher ed, is there's just more noise out there than there's ever been before. There's so many distractions. There are so many competing priorities in our organizations and in our personal life. All of the craze over AI and how fast new technology moves. So it's hard to fight all that noise and keep people focused. I think that the second thing that's out there is over the last couple of years, complexity has continued to grow. We're now integrating all these different point solutions and data lakes and different tool sets. And so I think that all of that complexity makes it more difficult for us all to stay on the same page. And I think that's what you've got to do is have that constant communication and coming back together to say, these are our values, this is our mission, and this is what we're trying to accomplish, and just doing the best you can to keep everybody together.
Okay, that was really great. So how do you foster that growth mindset? Because I think that's exactly what you need.
Absolutely. So it starts with a culture where we're safe to make mistakes, where if you're trying to innovate and you're trying to move the ball forward and do the right thing, that you're among friends and there's not going to be a gotcha out there if you happen to fall short. So I think that's where it starts, is creating that culture of safety where we're all here to get together and move the ball forward. We've tried recently taking a systems approach to our work, right? So making sure that everyone understands the organization, how it works, what are the different levers you can pull, and understanding exactly where our team fits within the scope of our mission and our organization, and tying it all together so that everyone on our team knows how that machine works. I think that's really important. And then lastly, encouraging learning and sharing and collaboration. I think it's a learned skill that you have to model as a leader to just keep coming out there and being vulnerable, being open and communicating. I think if you do that, it will encourage those that you work with to do the same, and that's how you build that culture of trust.
That's great. Doug, who are the customers across your portfolio that you see that most resemble Cory's leadership?
Yeah, exactly. The University of Utah, they do a pretty good job of that too. He's empowered the team to go do that. I'll use a sister organization of yours up at Cheryl, up at the University of Texas at Arlington. She's got that approach, and I worked with her back in my previous role and stuff, and I really love that team. I work with them a lot. But the best leaders I've ever had have been those that have that vulnerability. And as you point, if it's okay to fail, as long as you don't keep making the same mistake, that's bad. But you almost, because that's where the growth happens, is when you're out stretching and looking at things. And as we look at the way higher education, I see it transforming into the more mature model, more of okay, look, we need to get the bigger picture like you're talking about, in the bigger picture of the organization. That encourages the ability to go in and try that. Because before it's, okay, if it's a punitive and we can't really do that, we always have to do it the way it's always been done, right? Or we did this ourselves, we can build it better than somebody else. Maybe you can leverage another platform to go do something even more than that. But you have that safety zone, as he's talking about, to go try to feel and grow. And the best leaders I've found have done it that way.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Cory, jumping back to you, I was thinking about this. Have you been to the Texas Chili Parlor?
Oh yeah, I love it.
I went with Dan Texar, his team there. I was thinking, actually this would be a great question. What advice would you give to a state agency CIO looking back at your time now, both having been 2 years at McCombs, you did almost 20 at GLO, you're sitting down with Dan or somebody or another, or John Fowler, any of those Texas CIOs, agency CIOs, what advice would you give them?
The first advice I've given is you find yourself at the chili parlor, get the enchiladas. They're fantastic with a cold beer. I think giving advice about specifically moving into higher education, there are a lot of similarities, absolutely, between agency and higher ed. All of the higher eds in Texas, the state-supported ones rather, are state agencies technically. So there's definitely some tie in there as it comes to contracting, regulation, and purchasing. But what I was not quite prepared for was the decentralized nature of higher education. When you work in state government, there's usually a directive from the legislature or an elected official who's got a top-down, very mission-driven culture that they're pointing you in the direction that they're expecting you to go. In higher education, we're decentralized and we build our vision through collaboration and consensus. And on the one hand, some days that's frustrating because it takes longer, but we get the most creative solutions that way that really take into account lots of different perspectives. And so I think once you can understand, you're going to have some patience. When you get to the other end of the tunnel, you're going to end up with something that's really valuable and probably is a great fit for the organization.
Yeah, that's really great. You said decentralized. I want to hit on this. Doug, you've been able to see so many customers. What kind of insights have you gleaned around that ecosystem of a decentralized environment in higher ed?
Yeah, that's what made the higher educational system was found sort of a bit of the autonomy in that, and you have your budget, they all have these other things that go on, which gave you some freedom to explore. But I think at a higher level now they're realizing that, hey, if we combine forces and leverage, we can get more out of what we're doing and learn more from others. So the ones that I've seen are really embracing that. What can we learn from the other groups and do? Just because we've always done it is not a reason to keep doing it. What's new that we can go do? Again, when you're looking at this whole of education approach, at the top, how do we make them feel safe as well, that they have a good picture of what's really going on in all the institutions? Because if you've got these little fiefdoms where I'm sending in a report, how do you validate that report, right? How do I trust the data that is there? And giving them the platform where they can see all of that in one place. In the state of Hawaii, they use the CIO there used Tanium, and he created this dashboard of all the different governmental departments, and it's red, yellow, green on what they were doing. And he published that as just a transparency type thing, and it's amazing how fast everybody's turned to green when they got published. But again, you can then, as a legislator or something, I know that the money we're allocating is being well spent in doing the ultimate end, protecting the citizens of the state.
Doug, I want to zoom out across all the portfolios. What are the two to three biggest themes that you're seeing across your customer base?
One, a lot of interest is coming from the CISO side of the house. And it's what vulnerabilities do we have and all that. And I was doing a little research this morning, and still even today that 80%, Microsoft did a study, sorry I missed it, not too long, a couple years ago, that 80% of the vulnerabilities and breaches are unpatched software or applications. That's still today, right? And of those, 80% of those 80% could have been prevented if they would just simply done that. So knowing what you have is the very first thing. So the decentralization makes that really hard, because especially if you're using different tools and doing that, how do I report all this stuff in a consistent manner? So they're trying to get this, how do we get a true picture of what our environment is? That's the very first thing to go do. Then evaluate, how do we simplify things a little bit? Because the more complex they are, as an old quote from Star Trek and Scotty, the more they overwork the plumbing, the easier it is to clog up the drain. How do we simplify life and maybe standardize on a few things? And then it's empowering the people to go and do that. It's rewarding them for coming up with ideas on how to do things differently than we have before, and then sharing that information with them and peers. That's one of the great things about EDUCAUSE is there's so much sharing between the institutions and all, and everybody here, even the partners sharing that. It's a really great story.
So you said CISO, and I was curious around what's driving this. Is it the rise of the CISO in the last couple of years, just as far as it making it to that C-suite type of role?
Yeah, where it used to be CIO, then now there's like pairs, and there's different ways of doing it. You have the CTO above it. The org structure is constantly changing, but they understand how important it is. Information security used to be about just simply protecting the data. Now it's more than that. How do we protect everything all the assets that we have? And I think it is due to that transformation, the rise of that, to try to be on par with what the information officer does, so the two sides of the house, or whoever's in charge of operations. How do we work together? That's more the single best impactful thing is where you've got the operational side of the house working with the security side of the house to come up with a strategy. It's not my fault they're doing that. It's just, how do we work together to do that? So that's probably the key thing.
That's great. So EDUCAUSE's top 10, this is number 1 for 2024. Cybersecurity as a core competency, but balancing cost and risk. So Cory, how has your approach to risk management evolved with the increasing complexity of IT? You just hit on this earlier, and the cybersecurity threats in higher education. Walk us through how you think about IT visibility and risk management at McCombs heading into 2025.
So that's a great question, and it is something that is at the forefront of our mind. We have a duty to our students, our faculty, and our staff to provide them with technology solutions that are secure and resilient. That can be incredibly difficult on a college campus where everyone wants openness and to be able to share everything, all of their work at once. And so sometimes it feels like those two things are diametrically opposed. I feel like our role is to make sure that our faculty and our students are educated, that they have all of the information about what are safe practices, that we provide them with resources that they can use that are secure. And I think that you always have to find what's that right balance of risk and innovation. And it really depends on your organization, and it depends on the sensitivity of the information in question, right? So if we're building a solution that deals with a student record and FERPA protected data, where obviously it's a much more higher standard that we're putting to that solution than something that really focuses more on collaboration and sharing of data that's public in the first place.
I'm hammering this home, but this is like one of the biggest common themes when I met with CIOs heading into EDUCAUSE. The greatest challenge is that the open campus, right? And not to mention for universities that have large research centers, oftentimes people are bringing in their own laptops, professors are bringing in their own stuff, whenever they want. So you don't know what is going on in the environment. How are you handling that? How do you even think about handling that?
So that's
Yep, camera's right there, Cory.
Like I said, education and tools, making sure that we have tools that are secure, and that we are providing the right repository for the right set of data. Like I said, going and educating folks and saying, hey, you've got to treat this data set with extreme care, and so it belongs in this tool or in this repository, whereas this other data set, which is publicly accessible data, very low risk, we can be a little bit more open with what tools we use on that data. And so I think that's an approach that is working well for us right now. At the end of the day, they say your biggest risk points are your users. They're the ones that are utilizing your systems, and if they don't know what they should and shouldn't do, then there's no tool set in the world that's going to fix everything for us.
That's great. Question I was curious about, I didn't ask you about this before, but does McCombs or UT have its own SOC?
Yeah, so Cam Beasley, University of Texas Austin, our Chief Information Security Officer is Cam Beasley. He has a SOC, and he has an outstanding team. He monitors all of the colleges that are part of the University of Texas at Austin. They provide great service to us from vulnerability reporting. They have a SOC. They're constantly doing scanning to tell us what we need to patch up on our side. The vulnerabilities that you mentioned before that go unpatched are almost always because that patch would break something. And so my team is constantly in that mode of going to figure out, okay, we do have a vulnerability here. If we happen to run this patch right away, we're going to break this system. What is the risk versus reward of temporarily taking this system down to do a major upgrade versus leaving it open while we take a little bit more time to think through it? And so we are constantly going through that risk-reward trade-off of how do we move forward with this, and we get a great support from Cam and his team.
That's great. There's a quote, there's no perfect solution, there's only trade-offs.
That's exactly right.
And I really like that. Doug, on a very kind of similar vein, how do you see supporting your customers in that decentralized environment, especially you got the academic side, the research side, they're bringing their own stuff. How does Tanium try and help? Is it education? It can't just be solely through technology.
Yeah, and again, because we can overcome some of the security boundaries and stuff of existing things, because we can, we'll get down in a minute, because we can overcome that, we can help them get that visibility. So what I do, he comes up with a great point is, what makes the education great is also Achilles' heel, the freedom, and everybody's an administrator. I go try to explain to my commercial counterparts, look, everybody's an administrator and half of them can hack into your network without even thinking about it. So how do you protect that? How do you get that? But the ones that are thinking ahead are saying, again, you're turning the water up slowly in that, look, we want to put this agent on your device. We're not going to manage it, but we need to see what is there. And ultimately, it's better for you to know what your risk and stuff is. So you're not taking over their environment, but you're simply looking, hey, you're part of the universe. We want to see what's in there, especially like research. Researchers love to stuff under their desk and things like that. And it's just so that you know what you have. Again, you know what your risk is. What's the reward piece that comes on? So we enable that technology, but that's a discussion I have a lot. And those that are forward thinking are doing some of that. Like when talking about Cheryl, that was one of her ideas. Is we just need to know what the risk is, and then we can work on mitigating it later. So it's just an evolution, so it takes a while to get to that transformation phase. That progress is being made. If you'd asked me this before COVID, I'd have told you no. Because I've seen that, no, we're always doing it this way, and this is the way we're going to do it. And COVID changed a lot of things and accelerated and actually showed what IT departments could do. Because I would have customers say, well, we can't do that because it's just too hard. Within 3 months, they had done exactly the same thing I've been trying to get them to do for a long time. And I say, you can't use that excuse anymore. We're changing, we're playing well together. Education, everything's connected to the internet. This is the most open environment that you say, and it makes it hard. BYOD comes in, what are you connecting to? Everybody's got a device. IoT now is what's really a big concern. You've got all these things out there were designed to, it's out in an oil platform way out in the middle of nowhere. How do you go protect that? Because now it's not even physically protected, because if I get in my truck and drive out there, I can get access to it. So thinking about those other things as well, because now the number of endpoints that can be exploited is a magnitude of hundreds over what it was just 5 years ago.
Oh, you're exactly right. Everyone walks in the door with multiple devices, and you add to it with the classroom now. There's so much technology in the classroom, and we are buying a lot of standalone point solutions that need internet connectivity, so that we need to put them on the Wi-Fi and we need to put them on the network, but we don't have the ability to directly patch them. You rely on the manufacturer to push out those updates. And so a lot of times, it's the number of devices that we're having to worry about, the number of endpoints is mind-boggling.
Yeah, so Cory had a quote in one of her, it's either the very first, no, it wasn't, because it hadn't happened yet, so it was the second one. You were talking about your team had gotten really good at fighting fires. You were like professional. So Doug, I'm curious, how do you keep that, how do you help your customers keep the same level of intensity of, you can actually go do this versus the, hey, we can't?
The first thing you do is you got to give them some time. And that's one of the things that Tanium really does. You think about the things that are very intensive. Patching a SQL cluster. That is not something that happens, there's manual steps, there's other things that get involved. But yet you've got manpower there that could be going to fight that fire or doing something else. How do you take care of that 80% of the problems that you have with as few people and resources as you can? Tanium really helps them enable you to do that. So that, I don't think anybody ever has enough staff to get things done, but this sort of gives you that staff multiplier. I go back to the Winston Salem State. Her people were now doing higher, not value, but higher level things because they were freed up from that stuff that nobody gets in there to do. That's been a problem for 2 decades since it came up. Doing that, and then giving the visibility, again, because of our architecture, that you can then know, yeah, we're making progress and track it over time. And partnerships with other organizations like ServiceNow, if you want to create automate, again, not trying to promote these things, but how do you partner with these other things rather than being a point solution? How do you be part of the solution, right, as opposed to another problem or another silo?
Yeah, Cory, your team at GLO, you left, you get this new team. They don't have that context, they don't have that perspective. How do you drive the ball forward?
It's a lot of give and take, right? And so I think I came in with being asked to make some change and deliver some specific initiatives. And so part of it's getting the new team aligned to learn how we work together and how we're going to move down the path and execute this plan. A lot of it is me changing and me learning about the organization, learning about their background, learning about how the culture has operated successfully here in the past. And so I think it's a lot of give and take and learning from one another. I think if you do that with openness And if you create that trusting culture, it makes things a lot easier.
I like that approach too, in that you're not coming in just simply overturn the apple cart.
Not at all.
You're learning what everything is, and then how your past history, how can that maybe help make this better? And use it within the envelope that you have rather than simply blowing everything up like too many people come in and do.
We all have a lot that we can learn from the different things that we've been through together, and we all come in and we pledge to work together and put those ideas on the table and talk about it. 9 times out of 10, we agree on the way forward.
When you come in, I'm just curious, you don't have to go super long, but you come in, are you meeting with everyone on your team one-on-one? What's the tactical process for you to get the buy-in with your team?
I think coming in, establishing those relationships, meeting one-on-one, try to talk about things that aren't work-related at first. Tell me about your family. What sports team are you rooting for? Where'd you go on vacation? A lot of that in meetings, just getting to know people as people first, and then starting about that background. Tell me about some of the projects that you guys have done here. What are some of the really successful ones? What are some of the ones where we've struggled? Sharing my experience and just really getting us all on the same page and getting to know each other first and taking that fear out of it. I think as a leader, when you come in right away and you're talking about mission and execution, I think a lot of people can get the wrong idea, and I think that causes some fear and some concern. So you really want to put people at ease, build those relationships, and gradually start moving forward together as a team with an understanding of all of the things that we share in common.
Yeah, the human side and the relationship side, that's fundamental of human communication. If I trust you and I know a little bit more about you, your personal life, I'm more likely to go ahead and, yeah, okay, that really sounds good. Be open to that rather than, okay, he's just trying to go up the leadership chain.
Yeah, no, that's great. Cory, Doug, we're gonna close out. I got a couple more questions. We're gonna close out. We'll start with Cory. Cory, if you could give one piece of advice to a rising technology leader, this is Cory when he's 25 in higher education, what would it be?
The title I have now is Chief Information Officer, but really I think my job is, I'm a CAO, I'm a Chief Alignment Officer. I feel like my organization performs best when I am making sure that everyone understands their role. Everyone understands how we contribute to the overall mission, how other departments understand how we work and how we add value and how we can align together, how executive leadership understands what we need from a technology perspective to be successful and what we're going to be able to do with those resources to help the organization move forward and meet its goals. And I think constantly just going around communicating, keeping people on the same page, moving in the same direction, and being that chief alignment officer, that's what you need to do.
So there's the chief alignment officer, and I'm blanking on I'm going to remember it afterwards, but it's what CIO also stands for.
Career is over?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't respond with that one. So Doug, same question. What's a piece of advice that you would give to a rising cybersecurity leader?
Always be learning is the key thing, and this would go for anybody in technologies. You need to learn to be able to tell stories. And there's one from a communication standpoint. How do I share with my users why this is important? What's the value, the extra value they get them? And you have to tell that story in a language that they can understand, a framework from which they have. That's why when I go to education, because I've been speaking in it so long, even though the same problem may exist in the oil and gas, the words that are used are very different. How do I use the things that are appropriate, that again, getting back to that relationship, connecting with people? And then also it helps you from the storytelling perspective is looking out there, you see, this is going to be a problem. I see a theme, stories repeat themselves, and get ahead of some things like that. And when you're a storyteller, that's, I forget who said it, but they'll take over the world. And that's the way, and you tell stories to your reports when you're trying to build these things. You tell stories every week with your podcast guests. That's the most powerful tool you could get in anything, but from cybersecurity, you're explaining to my mother why clicking on that link is a bad thing, right? That's a totally different skill set than if I'm talking to Cory or somebody else that understands the ones and zeros to how to do that. So being able to do that, that's the key thing.
Yeah, I love the story. I love the Simon Sinek, right? This is very classic, like getting at the heart. There's just so many good stuff. I am laughing because my grandfather's passed away now, but when he was alive, my goodness, the guy would click on everything. Worked 50 years at UCSB, one of the smartest professors. This guy I would tell him, you've got to stop handing out bank account information, all this stuff. Grandpa, I know you're old, but you don't know this person. They're like, no, they told me that they know me. I'm like, that's not a link you want to trust on your iPad. Yeah. That conversation, radically different than Cory making an executive pitch for why he needs to purchase whatever software he needs to do. But Yeah, I love the story element is so critical. Understanding your audience, speaking to your team is much different than a peer-to-peer type of dynamics. I love this conversation. This is absolutely fantastic. Doug, as we continue to just highlight all these amazing leaders here at EDUCAUSE inside the Carasoft booth, is there anyone else that you would recommend that I interview next or even after this event?
Yeah, I would go talk to Cheryl up here because she's got a great, and I wanted to get her on the podcast, but she was unavailable. She's got a forward-thinking, nice from that information security officer perspective. She's forward-thinking, and she puts it very nicely. I would also go talk to out in Winston Salem State, the CISO there. She's got a fantastic story. I let her talk the whole time. I didn't say anything. It was like, okay, go ahead. You're doing a great job of doing that. Because she's been in there and she can tell that story about how the people were impacted by something that they started using. And that's an important story because ultimately you want to make the lives of your employees better and give them something that they can then go do the interesting things as you talked about it before. So those are some things I would do. And the guy from Utah, I would do that as well.
Is Sherilyn, is that what you said? You said Cheryl?
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Is Cheryl, she's the CISO?
Yes.
Is it UT System?
Arlington.
At Arlington. Okay, got it. Because we're going to have on William a little bit later. Yeah, he's fantastic.
I know you got Kendra on, I think, this afternoon, too.
She'll be the podcast after this. She's coming. So, Cory, same thing. Who else should come on the podcast?
Frank Fegan's UT Dallas. I think they're doing some really good, he's a CIO there, and I think they're doing some innovative stuff in the higher education space. And my colleague, Chris Tidrick with University of Illinois Geese School of Business, he's the CIO there. He runs a great shop as well. I think those are two leaders that you do really well to talk to.
Awesome, I love it. And Lee Bryan is coming on.
Oh, Lee Bryan's awesome.
Emailed me last night, 11:57. Joe, I'm coming. I was like, oh, fantastic. Excellent. We were gonna make it on. So thank you for coming on the Public Sector Show by TechTables.
Wouldn't miss it, thank you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by TechTables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves.